Past couple sessions, we talked about body and soul, the journey of the soul, and I want to get into a little more of the detail of how we are built. Okay? Because when we understand that, it's going to help us a little bit sort of navigate what's going on in our lives and what we're trying to accomplish. Okay? So let's start. There is something you may have heard of. And it's a very strange thing because it is a sort of a, it's got a bad rap, this concept. The reason why there's a bad rap is because the Talmud, it's recorded in certain texts that King Solomon taught these ideas to the ancient Greeks. Okay? As I mentioned to you once, we had a tradition that King Solomon had tremendous knowledge, both of the mystical world, of the Torah world, and of the natural sciences, because really they're two sides of the same coin. Anytime people think there's an argument between science and Torah, that's wrong. It's either you don't know enough Torah or you don't know enough science. But it can't be an argument because it's God's creation. But what happened was that King Solomon, King Shlomo, knew all of these things. He knew the Torah wisdom and he knew the sciences. As it's recorded, he knew the language of the animals, he knew where to plant things. The Jews wanted the Torah part. They really didn't want the science part. And really so, he had other people that wanted the science part. Some of those people were the Greeks. Before the Greeks were known as tremendous philosophers, it's recorded in the time of King Solomon. It's called the Chochmei Atuna. The wise men of Athens used to come and visit and learn. And then afterwards you see Greece moving into developing scholarship. But King Solomon taught them some ideas. Now, many of the ideas that the Greeks had in natural sciences are incorrect. And they've been proven to be incorrect. We know that clearly. We know their astronomical signs and the way they understood the world was incorrect. And largely the reason for that was because Aristotle, his belief in how to understand the world was not what we have today in the world, which is experimental ways to understand. Right? We do an experiment, and the experiment then dictates to us the results, and we understand the natural world. Aristotle had a whole different way. Aristotle did not believe you needed experiments. Okay? He said, all I need to do is sit in this armchair and philosophize about what it should be. Okay? Hey. Say hello. Hello. Oh, we're stealing the show. Say bye to Rob. Bye, sweetie.
Bye, Miriam.
So Aristotle believed he could sit in his armchair and philosophize about what would be the truth. And the reason why he did was he said the mind can figure whatever it is out, and that has to be the system of science based on the human mind, which is really not accurate, because quantum physics does not make sense by the human mind. But Aristotle figured that, and he expounded a lot of things that he never tested, and they ended up not being true. So a lot of the Greek ideas in the natural sciences have been rejected, and they're false. Certain things that the Greeks learned from King Shlomo, they took and they developed it into their own ideas. Okay? Everyone good? Everyone relaxed? There's a lot of movement going on. Now entering a Kabbalistic trance. You are feeling very relaxed. You wonder how relaxed you may feel. Okay. Now, so here's one of the concepts Shlomo taught the wise men of Athens, and it's been rejected in the world because it's now misunderstood based on what the Greeks turned it into or what people think it says. But the concept is true. And the concept is as follows. The Greeks talked about the idea of the four elements. Four elements. Now, that is patently not true if you look at your periodic table, and if you've gone to elementary school, high school, or any other schooling, the basic elements are not the 4 elements, as the Greeks say. However, that's not what Shlomo Melech was talking about, what King Solomon was talking about, and that's not what it means. We don't believe that there are 4 elements in the periodic table and that's it. But there are 4 concepts, there are 4 structures in the world that we call the 4 fundamental bases of the world in the physical world and in the spiritual world. And that is true. The Greeks took that idea and then built off of that. But King Shlomo did teach that idea, and that idea is based on classic Torah thought. Not from the Greeks, but there are 4 fundamental structures. I have a friend who's a physicist and a Kabbalist, and he claims, I don't know if this is true, but he claims that the 4 elements are relevant to the 4 forces in the world today. Okay, could be. If you study quantum physics, you can claim that. But it doesn't matter for us, our purposes. For we understand what are these 4 elements. The 4 elements are called the famous band, Cliff, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Wasn't it 4?
And they didn't have water, because there's no water but Torah. They didn't have any Torah. That's why they weren't so good. They had a good rhythm and they had a good beat, because they were Earth, Wind, and Fire, but they did not have water. Okay, so these are the 4 elements. Let me write them down again. Earth, we'll call it air, fire, and water. Okay? And now these are 4 structures of the world. Okay? Those who have gone to any type of Chinese medicine, you'll find that this is kind of the scenario they talk about. My mechutin, I don't know how to say it in English, my in-law, as opposed to my outlaw, my in-law, he's a Chinese doctor, and he's not Chinese, no, he's a doctor of Chinese medicine. His son gets it all the time. My son-in-law, he says my father's, Chinese doctor. I said, you don't know Chinese. I don't mean that. He's a doctor of Chinese medicine. And I once asked him, because in the Chinese system now, they often do the 5 elements. But if you look in certain Chinese texts, there are many texts that talk about the 4 elements also. So I asked him how he reconciles this, and he said really that because he said the 5 elements really come down to what they call yin yang, which is male female, which is the two parallels. But in Chinese thought also there's very often there's 4 elements in many of the systems. Now the more popular Chinese medicines deal with 5 elements. But it comes down to the same structure. And when you hear in Chinese medicine, you go to a doctor, he'll say to you, too hot, too hot. Did you have too much fire? Too cold, too much water, And this is actually a diagnosis you'll hear. Too much wind, you'll hear this because they're dealing with a balance, right? Which there are cures for that. But we're dealing with a balance, and that's what they're trying to get, a balance of these things. So we say now that these 4 elements really are the underpinnings, whatever it means, in the physical world, but in the spiritual worlds too. And we talked before, we said that there is a physical world, which is the physical world. And we have, let's say, we have the Olam Asiya, the world of action. Right? And we had the world of the next level was called Yetzirah, formation. And just as an example, so there we talk about in the physical world of action, we talk about these 4 elements as they are: earth, wind, fire, and water. But in the Olam HaYetzirah, which is the world of the angels, it takes on a different name. What is it? Well, the angel of fire is called Gabriel. The angel of water is called Michael. That's you. The angel of air is Oriel. And the angel of earth is Raphael, that heals you. Sorry, Oriel and Raphael. Same thing also when you get to a higher level. We talk about the 4 in the vision of the Kabbalah, vision of Ezekiel, the 4, the chariot that has the 4 different sides to the chariot. It's all the same thing. It's now these four concepts, what they represent, earth, wind, fire, and water, what they represent now on a higher level, which are the different animals in the vision there. If it's the lion, it's the eagle, right? It's the, those four things. Fine. That is the basic structure of the world. There is an earth, wind, and fire. That is considered to be, again, it's not that we created, I understand this because it's a little hard. It's not that actually everything is just earth, and you take earth and you mix it with fire and you create that. But these concepts, what they represent, these four fundamental ideas in their roots, they translate down into the physical world, and the physical things are considered a combination of these things. Okay? They're a combination. And they quoted Chinese medicine, therefore, when they're looking for balance and healing, they might say, you have too much heat. Okay? And that might mean the person has a personality that has more fire in it, and he may be feeding that more, and it may create an imbalance in his system. But these are four elements that are for the physical world, and the same concept is represented in the spiritual world. Whether it's the angels, whether it's the angels in the chariot, the visions in the chariot that are around God's throne. It's these four elements in a spiritual context. Questions on this concept? Yeah.
Are we going to cover the interactions?
Yeah, right now.
Then I'll wait on my question.
Good. So, now why is this so important to us? Well, it's very important to us because since that's true, that we have these concepts, it's going to affect us in certain ways. Now, we talked last time about the 5 parts of the soul, right? What I did kind of leave out is what's brought in the Zohar. Tanya brings it, Maruchu brings it, many sages bring this. There's a part of the soul that they sometimes call the Nefesh Bahamit, which is called the animal soul. Okay? And I will translate it in another sense for us as the life force. It could be what the Chinese people call qi. Could be that. What is the life force? The life force is not necessarily your divine soul that we're talking about. But you have a life force that enlivens you and makes you function. And that's not necessarily a part of the divine spark. I remember, I believe I've seen it quoted, I think, Rabbi Kaplan in one of his notes on Derech Hashem. If I remember correctly, I believe he says that this actual part, this actual level of the soul is not really called in the spiritual world. It's called the highest level in the physical world, right? Because there are things that are in the physical world that are very ethereal, but they're still physical, right? Like, for example, hormones or electrical impulses. And therefore, if you kind of look at how the body works, there's electricity in the body that makes things function. And it's not always you can see it, you can touch it. So there are parts to the person that might give them life that may be considered to be very ethereal, but may not be in the category of the spiritual realm yet. And that may be, well, what's called the life force, the nefesh bahamit, the animal soul, the basic force that gives you life, and not the part of your soul which is connected to that, which is the divine soul with its 5 parts. So there's a basic part that you have that enlivens you. Now, when that soul enlivens you, you have a person's soul, an animal has an animal soul. But the way it works is that imagine you have a mind, a brain. Not hard to imagine. Everyone here does? Thank God it was you and me in this class. So, we have a mind. In the mind, we have the power of memory, the power of self-awareness, we have all of these potential ways that our body could function. But it's only when they become enlivened with a life force, do these parts function according to the way they are prescribed, right? The potential for memory will not function if there's not a life force enlivening the brain. Whatever part in the brain it is that is in charge of memory, it requires the life force, the nephesh, behind the basic living part of you to be able to go and to function. And therefore, everything in the creation has a life force. They don't all say have divine soul, but everything has got a life force that makes it function. Okay? Now, so according to this, your life force, your nefesh bahamit, in this world, functions as an admixture of good and evil. You see, once we talk about, when we learn the story of Bereshit, of Genesis, and Adam and Eve there, it's not the reality that we live in today, it's a different reality. Once they go and they eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that combination is in everything in the world. All created things are affected by this combination of good and evil, which is our reality. That's why you don't meet someone generally who's all good or all bad. There are different parts to what we're about, okay? And therefore, even in this life force, there are aspects of these four elements that are of the positive side and of the negative side. Now, let's go through them. So, if in your nefesh bahamit, in your animal soul, the basic life force soul, we'll call it life force soul. The nefesh bahamit has a very negative connotation. Here, we'll put in the life force soul. So, if there's fire in the negative side, what traits do you think fire would be lined up with?
Anger. Jealousy.
Anger. What else?
Jealousy.
Jealousy, haughtiness.
Haughtiness. Arrogance.
Right? Arrogance, haughtiness. Right?
But it could be positive too. It could be
That's right.
passion.
That's right. Exactly.
Wow.
And that's the two sides.
Mm-hmm.
That is the two sides. By the way, I do that in my Tai Chi Kabbalah class. That I do that where we go through the different parts and actually do, work on that, trying to emphasize the positive part of the traits. Because of course, fire is a very positive element. Fire is passion. It's called riska d'oraisa, the burning desire for holiness of Torah. So yeah, we don't want people that are like, wet noodles. It's like when you get the handshake, like, how you doing? Like, wet fish.
Yeah.
We don't want wet fish. We don't want wet fish. We want people that are. So, but fire here has the potential negative quality in the nefesh bahamit, the life force, of leading to anger or jealousy. And water has. I want to try it that, what that might be, what the negative quality of water might be. So the positive side, we'll say like Hillary said, the positive side of fire is going to be passion for positive things. And that's why fire, the sages tell us, fire goes up. Because fire is the passion to connect to the highest level. The fire rises. Okay? So fire on the negative is anger and jealousy and hardness. And the positive, it's passion for connection. Okay, what's water?
Passivity?
Passivity? Why passivity?
I don't know.
Well, water, I mean, I again, you missed the first part where I just spent about
Easily
20 hours in my creek for the past 2 days. Water is not passive. I've already learned that, already learned that. But water does one thing that's quite amazing. It causes all things to grow.
And it's life.
It's life, and it gives, and it makes, when you live in Georgia, we got beautiful stuff here in Georgia. Why? Because it rains a heck of a lot. It rains a lot. So when you have rain, you have beautiful things, and you have fruits. If you live in an arid place, you don't have that. So water, also the negative, is called desire for extraneous, for extraneous things. It's the passion of not for, it's not desire like in fire, but it's called motzros in the words of the sages. Motzros means that you just want delicacies and you just want, like, sip your mint julep by the beach, and almost every vision you have of like your vacation that's enjoyable is by the water, almost always. Some people like going out to the desert, it's true, but it's a different kind of trip. As you're sitting, you're sweating, it's a different trip. When you want to imagine chilling out, and like, what would be like to really just chill out? In your head, you're either by the beach, by the lake. That's usually where you are. So water, in that sense, is desire for extraneous. It's for pleasure. It's a pleasure seeker. On the positive, water. What do you say on the positive for water?
Is it a kind person, giving person?
The giving person. The giving person. Water also has the quality of wisdom. Wisdom is cool, and as opposed to fire, which is in the heart, water is connected with the mind. Fire is your passion for your heart, but your mind is cooler and can actually come up with something, and which is really why it's pleasure. The sages tell us, by the way, and as far as this goes, that fire, and water have very different responses, and we'll talk about even there's different negative things that are in the world. Fire, it says in the sages tell us that anger, idolatry, haughtiness, that negativity is going to be removed from the world at some point. But the desires that come from water are not removed. It says in the verse that a spring is going to come from Jerusalem, which I said they found there's a certain era spring right by the temple. They found actually this potential spring that could pop out, which is recorded in one of the prophets. A spring will come out from the temple. And the sages tell us that means that the pleasure and desire, pleasures we have in the world is going to turn to ched v'dishmaisa. It's the joy of connectivity, of Torah, it becomes a love of pleasure for being connected to spirituality. So pleasure could be directed in two ways. It could be extraneous, it could be, self-absorbed, or it could be a holy pleasure, which we do say that. And that's why we even say the physical pleasures in the world that you get, make sure they're connected to a spiritual root. Otherwise, you end up being like an animal, and it becomes disgusting to you also. At a certain point, when the pleasures that you pursue are devoid of a connection to something more spiritual, people get sick of them, and they get sick of themselves. But when a person has relations in a holy way, in a proper way, eat Shabbos dinner in a holy way, in a proper way, so the whole thing is just great on a physical level, but on a spiritual level too. So the positive will be the pleasure, and it's called wisdom, that could be used. But the negative is extraneous pleasures. Question?
I was just going to say, what about like accommodating for water? If we're looking for more, but you're done.
What is
Because I just
accommodating?
the way they explain water, that it'll go through anything, like nothing stops it, so it accommodates.
Yeah, that's true. That's why water is called the ultimate physicality, because water doesn't have any vessel you put it in, it takes that form. Mm-hmm. That's why water is ultimate physicality. That's why when the Jews walk through the Red Sea, it's a very significant symbolism of going through the most physical thing, which is water, and that. So water does not. It's true, but that really is actually its quality of physicality. That it's always used in whatever way you use it. It doesn't have any form of its own. But one of the things about water is that water. The sages always compare water, which is it's Daf Yomi today. That water goes to the lowest spot. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Torah is compared to water. One of the reasons it is because we don't want people that are, hey, I'm really a smart guy, I'm going to be a big Torah scholar. No, you're not. No, you're not. If that's what you think, you're not going to be anything. You're going to be nothing. Because the Torah goes to the lowest spot. So, it's a great story. Did you do it off today? It's a great story. There's Gemara. The Torah goes to humility. So there's a story of this Rabbi Yeshua who was fantastically ugly. He was like really, really, really ugly. And he knew it. He knew it. And what happens, one of the Roman noblewomen says to him, you know, "Man, you're really ugly. I mean, you've noticed that, didn't you?" I know that. Been told. He says, "Listen, so, and you're such a knowledgeable sage." He says, "Listen, wouldn't it have been better if you were like beautiful too? And you'd have this knowledge of the Torah in this beautiful, you know, face and beauty coming out of you?" So he says to her, he says, "Listen, maybe. Let me ask you a question. Does your father, the emperor here, does he have any wine?" And she says, "Sure." I said, what does he keep it in? He keeps it in, you know, clay vessels. He says, "Listen, he's the king. Why would the king keep it in clay vessels? You should tell him to go and to put it into silver and to gold vessels. He's the king." So she tells the servants, they put the wine, they put it into silver and the gold vessels, and then they serve it a couple of days later, and it's off. It's terrible. So the king says, "Who told you this stupid idea?" So he says, "Rabbi Yeshua." So they call him in. He says, "What the heck was that?" He said, "Listen, she said to me, wouldn't it be better that if I was better looking?" And the answer is no, because the fact that I'm so ugly, it makes it that I'm humble and my Torah resides in me. It's the same thing with your wine. Your wine goes better in the junky clay pots. You try to hold them in the fancy ones, it goes sour. If I had the Torah and I was a good-looking guy, then it would go sour on me. I'm very happy to be this ugly. That's what he said. So that really is what the sages on the same page compare water to Torah, because water always finds the lowest spot, and therefore Torah will only go to somebody who's humble, not someone who thinks he's a hotshot. Okay, next one.
What about water being cleansing?
Yeah, that's right.
Going through the mikvah.
That's right. That's right. Water is called Torah, because that purifies you.
The negatives that you drown in water.
Yeah, and there I would tie that to this, to the pleasure of drowning. In other words, when a person becomes obsessed with his pleasure, they drown in it. You can't get out of it after a while, because you know that's
Addiction.
you know it's addiction. It becomes, you know, Las Vegas and everything is like pumping in the oxygen 24/7. You know, deal the cars. All right, next one is what? Air.
Is there a specific level? Is this actually?
Yeah, there is. I'm not going to go through that now. I'm not going to go through that now. There is earth, water, fire, and air. Air, yeah. No, actually, I don't remember. No, it's earth, water, air, and fire. That's right. Earth, water, air, and fire. Air. In the negative, the Baal Tanya says air is a guy who's like, a guy you meet and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to tell you about myself. Let's talk about my favorite topic tonight." Me. Right? So this is boasting, shooting off your mouth. That's the negative side of it. Okay? Boasting, bragging, narcissism, idle chatter. That's what the Baal Tanya says is the negative. I don't know, what would you call positive in air? It's an open question. He doesn't give it. What do you say the positive in air would be?
I say spirituality.
I would say spirituality. Oh, that's what I would say also. I say spirituality. I'd say air is the quality of being able to sort of rise above things and not to be so stuck on the basics. By the way, and speaking of that, I shared this with you before, but in Israel there are 4 holy cities. This is a very famous teaching of the Arizal, and they're compared to these 4 elements. Okay? And everyone, you know, and so it's a very famous teaching of the Arizal, but the people in one of the cities know, there's one city of these 4 that everyone knows this teaching of the Arizal. Okay? So can you figure out the 4 cities? So Earth, you know which one Earth would be the four cities?
Tel Aviv.
Hebron.
No.
No, there's
Tel
Hebron.
Aviv is not a city.
There's Hebron.
Hebron. Not the gas station, but Chevron. But Hebron. Hebron really is very earthy. I mean, it's like this rocks, and it's a place of burial of the forefathers, and it's really, you see it. It's very arid. It's very earthy. It's people are buried there. What, you know what water is?
Elat?
No, because Elat's actually not part of Israel proper. It's Tiberias, right? Tiberias. That's where the Sea of Galilee is, right? The Yam Kinneret, and there's water there, and you feel it's like really just very powerful, the water element there. Fire, you know what fire is?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. It is fire. It's very intense. It's very intense. I remember when I was in Israel one time, these guys were hitching a ride. Two Israeli guys that had spent Israelis travel a lot after they go into the army. These guys have been traveling India for a while, and I hate to say it, but they only had a few brain cells that were left. They had done a lot of things. They're like, oh man, they didn't know what they were doing in India, but they were having a party. But they became somewhat spiritual in their Indian, pursuit, and they came back to Israel, and they were getting into the Jewish thing. But they were visiting Jerusalem, and I remember I gave them a ride, and they were like, wow, man, it's so intense here. It's like fire. I was like, yeah, it is. Jerusalem is fire. And the city was burnt down with fire, and it's rebuilt with fire. And the last one that everyone does know is Air is the city of Tzfat. And everyone in Tzfat knows. Has anyone been to Tzfat? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everyone from Tzfat knows this teaching of the Arizal, and they know their Air. And if you ever met some of the people in Tzfat, they're like kind of like Air. So they meet you in the street and they say, "Wow, man, there are four elements. There's Jerusalem, and there's Hebron, and then there's Tiberias, and we're Air, man." Loading away. Happy sales. That's Tzfat. So Tzfat is Air. Hebron is Earth. Earth. What would you think Earth would be on the negative side?
Depression.
Depression, that's right.
It's heavy.
It's called Atzvus and Atzlus. Atzvus is sadness, heaviness, depression, and laziness. Laziness. If you find that this is happening to you, now the positive side could be, I would guess, humility. Humility. Right? Earth. As we say at the end of our prayers, we say, my soul should be like everyone's like the earth, the dust of the earth. Right? That's the last line we say in the solemn prayer. What does it mean? The earth, when you step on it, doesn't change, doesn't get ruined. So if you're really humble, someone steps on you, it's not going to shake you because you have a certain amount. You can't be damaged. You have a certain amount of ability. But this is earth, and this is sadness and laziness. Now these four.
Hold on. You finish your thought. You said if you find yourself being lazy, then you stop.
If you find yourself being lazy, then you probably have an overdosage of earth quality.
And what's the cure? Go to the beach?
It's always the cure. It's always the cure. But let me explain to you why. So yeah. Now, but this is very important because this means that these four elements are now they are in everything. The physical world, the spiritual world are also composed of them. You have a life force that has both positive and negative, and you have certain qualities of positivity, but you have certain qualities of negativity. And that's really going to be, like all people have, some place of laziness and sadness, and some place of boasting, and some place of wanting pleasure, some place of haughtiness. And that's what you got to work on to change. But what happens is that every person and everything in the world is made with a different combination of these things. And that's why one person is a lazier person, one person is more of a hothead, one person is more of a space case, right? One person is a pleasure seeker, right? That's the people you have. It's a different combination of these elements in who you are. And that's going to be for good or for bad. In the negative, we saw negative qualities. It could be turned to the positive. So what do you do if you have this? Well, first of all, you do processes of change, which is learning Torah, dealing, there's a Rabbi Nachman in Breslov was a very, very famous Hasidic rabbi. And he's the one who coins the phrase, should always be with joy, right? It's a mitzvah to always be enjoyed. He probably was, as far as I've heard, he was a depressed person by nature. Extremely depressive. But he worked on it. He worked on it. And he worked on being happy. And that's why so much of his Torah, his teachings, are about happiness. Because usually whatever your worst trait is going to be is where your greatness is going to come from. Because that's going to be your challenge. When you learn how to overcome and take the good out of the quality, that's how you make yourself great. Okay, questions, thoughts, comments on this so far? Yeah.
Don't these also line up to the 4 letters of God's name?
Yes, they do. Yes, it does. It lines up the 4 letters of God's name, and it's yes, and that really is, by the way, just to bring this point home, what Michael is saying, and that's why we say everything in the world is a combination of God's letter, the Tetragrammaton. I'm just making a separation because you're not supposed to write the name, so I'm making a separation. So the Tetragrammaton is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, and that's the 4 letters, and it does line up with the 4 elements. It lines up with most of the things that are 4 we talk about. Even the parts of the soul, they line up the same way also. There are 4 parts, right? And really, so you have what's called the nefesh, we said here. Nefesh. Then we have the ruach. And then we had the neshama. And yud was the chaya. And where's the 5th one? It's called the kotzel shel yud. The tip of the yud. That's a separate level. Why is it a separate level? Because the things on the higher levels, they can't be represented in the world. They're represented by a fine dot in the physical world. And this is the level of Yechida, which is just the top of the Yud. Now it's called the Kos. This little tiny bit at the end, remember it's in the Yechida. And that's true for all of the systems. It's really 4, that's 5. I said there are 4 different worlds. We have the world of Asiya, action, okay, the world of formation, Yitzira, formation, the world of Bria, creation, and then the world of Atzlus, where we say it's about divinity, Atzlut, Atzilus, Atzilus, which is emanating, means emanation, that's divinity. And then the top one, we didn't talk about this so much, but this is called the world of Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon, which is the beginning of all of creation. Okay, but that we didn't get into that in this. Maybe we'll do it in the next one. I don't know. But Adam Kadmon is in the very beginning when God first starts to create the universe, and we talked about he conceals himself to create a universe. The first emanation of that level is called Adam Kadmon. But you're right. These things line up with the elements. They line up with the worlds. They line up with your soul. The thing about when you start learning Kabbalah, it's not a lot of. There are tons of facts you could learn. But the reason why it's so easy to keep it in track, in a certain sense, is because it's one system. It's not random things. Every single thing is interconnected. It's like the human body, everything works together, it's interconnected. So you know that this has to go here, this has to go there. Everything in the world fits into a certain place, and everything is lined up with everything. like the holographic image I talked about before, that everything is inside of everything. Okay, so those are, now so what have we gotten so far? We've had the 4 elements in terms of creation, the physical world, 4 elements in terms of the spiritual world, the way they're built, what they represent. They exist in us. We talk about we have a higher part of our soul, and we have a lower part of our soul, which is the life force. And in that life force, we also have these 4 elements as compositions, and there's a mixture of good and evil, and we can see that in how we function. And how we live our lives, and what we're about is the combination, and that's who we are. That's not good or bad. That's our challenge and our ability to grow. And if you have anything of these qualities I talked about, then you have, in terms of your balance, you have a stronger sense of one of those 4 elements that's causing this tilt. And there's all the combinations of them that create the subcategories, and that's both in the negative and it's also in the positive. There's certain positive qualities in the animal soul that is in people itself that we do have, and that's just part of the way we're built. Yeah.
So with the correlation of the letters to the different elements, I guess. So you have 2 hays. Right. So what's the difference between the 2 hays?
So you see, let me talk about Earth a second, because really the way the sages always talk about these 4 elements is really 3, and then there's the 4th. The 4th is a lonely guy here. See, the Earth element is really the one that is the lowest element, and it's the one everything is created from. These are called active. Okay, this is called receptive. This receives, the 4th one receives. Okay? Everything is in the physical world is made from earth. Okay? And we all go back to the earth because this is the primary state of the lower part of us. These are acting upon earth. Earth is why we say man is created from earth, that earth is taken, and their other elements are the active ones that are moving onto earth. The last hay in Hashem's name is the receptive one. Okay? We're talking about the qualities. Let me just answer you like this: the last hay, the fact that it's redundant and repetitive is part of the process. That it's the receiver. It's not an initiator. Now it's the same as the hay in terms of the upper hay, which is the feminine aspect, and the receiver is the ultimate feminine aspect also. Okay. We talk about the 10 spheres, if you remember. So we have like this. We have that. We have Yud. The Yud here is wisdom. Chachma. Remember Chachma, we talked about that? Chachma, wisdom. And that's called the male. The wisdom and the understanding, the Bina, are 2 partners that never separate. This is the female aspect. Okay? Chachma and Bina are connected. Okay? Then you have the Vav brings it down. Okay, it's the 6 traits we talked about. Okay, that's kindness, restraint, balance, dominance, empathy, foundation, and it's giving this Vav, which is the 6, gives it over to the repeated Hay, which is the receptacle, the Malchut, that receives everything. So it's got a similarity in terms of this. This is a female. This is a female. Again, God is no male and female, of course. But in terms of the way we understand the concepts, this would be a connected one. But this one is the receiving hay. Now the same thing here. We talk about it in terms of this. The 3 and the 4. The three elements. The 4th. That's the 3 forefathers, which is Abraham, right? There's water. And Yitzchak, which is fire, and Yaakov, which is air, and the one that receives is the female quality of King David, and that's Earth. It's Earth that always receives here. That's Earth. So the fourth one is always receiving from the other three. The other three are the more active, and Earth is why Earth is considered to be the basics, because everything has Earth in it, because the creation of this world is from the Earth. That is the lowest quality, that's the most physical quality, and everything else acts upon Earth. Questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah.
When we had is that the mind, heart, body? Like you have a mental conception and it affects the heart to the body?
To a certain degree. Yeah, but you're missing one then. So, it depends how you set the structure up. Some ways it's set up this. Yeah, yes, that is true what you said, but that's mind, the Chochmah Bina. And then the 6 parts and the last part, which would be the action.
Were there always meant to be 3 forefathers?
Yeah. 4 foremothers. That's right. I don't know if 4 foremothers could have been 3, but yeah. 4, yeah, sure. Yeah. It's 3 different, because the forefathers are taking 3 different aspects that have to be brought into the world. Everything is in 3. Everything has to be a balance. You can't be too much this, you can't, that's what we talked about in one of the earlier classes. You can't be too much this, you got to be balanced. It's always going to come to the balance.
So Esav was meant to drop out of the equation.
That's a philosophical question. No, Esav could have made it, and he would have had a different role then. He had a different role. He would have been the physical person, right, the one in charge of the physical world for Yaakov, who was going to be the Torah learner. Yaakov was still going to be the quality of Torah and truth and beauty, and combining Yitzchak and Yaakov, Yitzchak and Avraham. But Esav would have been the continuation of Yitzchak, but using that power to subjugate the physical world and support Yaakov in his next endeavors. Okay, this kind of makes sense a little bit. I know it's a little bit. I was a little bit wary to do this class, to say the truth, because it's a little bit out there. But I think it's important just to get the whole picture. This is what it is. Now, so let's go. What do we have? So now we have the 4 elements: the physical and the spiritual worlds. We talked about last time the soul, the higher part, the 5 parts of the Neshama Lokis, the divine soul. We talked about the life force, and we said that once there's good and evil mixed in this world, it all has that, and these 4 elements in our own physical bodies, they pull us in different directions. Now, let's understand a little bit more about the way that we're built. So we know we have a body, okay? This is 2 years of art class. We know we have a body, okay. We know that in the body we have the soul, the life force, okay? Life force, nefesh b'hamis, which somehow the sages say comes in through the blood. Hard to understand what exactly that means. I think that Rabbi Kaplan wanted to say that was some kind of impulses. I forgot what he called it in the blood. It was something in the blood. I forgot what he called it. I'm not enough a science person to understand what it was, but he wanted to claim there was something in the blood, somehow some connection. But somehow it connects through the blood somehow. And then we have the divine soul. Okay? So we have the spiritual component here, okay? Soul in the general, and we have body. Now, according to this, that could be enough. That could already be enough. I got a body, and I got a soul, and the soul has the divine part, it has the more basic part, the life force, which can pull me in different ways. But there is another system here that we need to understand. Okay? In addition to the body, in addition to the soul, there are two more systems that are superimposed upon this. 2 more systems. What are these systems? you've heard the term, and we discussed it, but I wanted to explain it tonight. You've heard the term Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara.
Back to the beginning.
That's right. The good inclination and the bad inclination. Now, what are these things exactly? What are they? What are they doing? And where are they? And how does this work?
They're on your shoulders telling you good and bad.
That's right, exactly. One's got a pitchfork. So the Kabbalists actually explain, and this is what it's explained, it's brought in the Zohar, and it's brought in the Shloh, and many other commentators say, these are in the category of malachim, a spiritual force. A spiritual force that is connected to you, and it's your spiritual force. Okay? It's a spiritual force that's connected to you, your Yetzer Tov, your Yetzer Hara. It's very, very personal. There may be a global one, I taught you earlier, that's called the Satan. Okay? But the personal Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara you have are actually in the category of malachim, of spiritual agents that are connected to your system that help motivate you. The way it's explained in the Kabbalah, if you can understand this in this way, it's kind of like you have the body. And then when you have the body, inside that is now the Yetzer Hara. That's the agent that's pushing the body towards what it's already connected and wanting. The body, by definition, wants physical things. It's the body. Now you have a propelling force that exists inside, which is the Yetzer Hara, which is the force that pushes you towards both physicality and also towards even sometimes wanton destruction. The Yetzer Hara is very, very bizarre because it has different qualities. One definition of Yetzer Hara is it's people chasing after the body and desire. But Yetzer Haras do other things also. Like it's a very weird thing if you ever notice that if you ever watch National Geographic and you see the little horsey being born, the first thing he does, he gets up and the horse, I don't know how long it takes him, an hour or two, he gets up, starts trotting around, you know, seeing his environment, you see the horse getting up and they're kind of like a horse and they're sort of sufficient. And self-sufficient, they need the mommies, but they know their instincts kick in. And then you have the pinnacle of creation, mankind, and a baby is born, and everything it shouldn't do is what it does. There's almost no sense of self-preservation. The baby will walk into a fire, the baby will take poison, anything they shouldn't do, it will do. Well, isn't that weird and I find it strange? It's weird. Why is that? So, I mean, it's going to sound crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but if you understand it. The sages tell us that that is connected with the Yetzer Hara. Meaning that the direction of the child is not necessarily for self-sufficiency and functionality. The baby at 3 in the morning does not say to itself, my mother looked really tired when she put me to sleep. Maybe I shouldn't cry. Maybe I'll just make it through the night tonight. You know what? I'll give her the night off. It doesn't say that. Because the baby wants to eat, it eats. It doesn't care. The baby is completely narcissistic. That's one element of Yetzer Hara. Another way you could see it is sometimes it's almost wanton destruction, which is it's not built to self-preserve. So the Yetzer Hara person is a force in the person that can propel us to things that are counterproductive. Whether they are an excess of pleasure, whether they are sometimes crossing over to things that are just negative. Now, and I know it's hard to imagine, I'm giving the idea of a baby, and babies, everyone babies, we love babies. But when you get older, you could kind of see that, because you could see the certain negativity people often come with. Sometimes it's like they just want pleasure. Sometimes it's power. And sometimes it's just like they're like doing like negative stuff. Where's that coming from? Well, that's the first level inside the body called the Yetzer Hara. Now, inside of that, so to speak, is the Yetzer Tov, the part that is pushing you towards positive. And so inside of that is the neshama. Now, when I say inside and outside, I don't mean that literally, but I mean that the Yetzer Tov is more hidden. He's kind of like inside. We don't listen to him as much. First of all, we don't know him as well. He's a little more of a stranger. The Yetzer Hara you have from the day you're born. The day you're born, it already has. Now, again, it doesn't mean kids are not sweet and beautiful. It doesn't mean that. But an example is that the kid wants to nurse. The kid wants to nurse. There is nothing else. The kid wants his candy, wants his candy. So you train the kid, listen, you can't go and take candy. All right, they may listen. Hopefully they will listen. But the instinct is, candy, candy. You know, I need candy. That's the instinct of the kid, right? And it's not like, you know, thinking about, when the person turns 12 or 13, girl 12 and boy 13, so now all of a sudden they have the part of the Yetzer Tov. And that's now sort of like more removed, it's more internal, and it's not as easily felt. But according to this scenario, the Yetzer Hara is closer to the body, and the Yetzer Tov is closer to the soul. Why? Because these are agents of each. The Yetzer Hara is now pushing the body towards the things that it wants, and the Yetzer Tov is now the agent of the soul trying to get everyone on board to what the soul wants. And you're living in this dichotomy where bodies pull in one way, okay? You have good and bad mixed up inside of how you're built in terms of the different elements. You have part of the Yetzer Hara pulling you towards these things. You have now part of the Yetzer Tov that's a little bit more concealed and a little bit more a newer guy in town who's pulling you towards positive, and the soul, which should be overpowering the whole system, and it's not. It's kind of hidden in the system. And that's the balance that you live in. We live in this whole balance. It's fascinating. And I mean, I have a few minutes. I'm going to explain how one class I gave a class once to show you where Freud got his stuff. I want to show you in a second how he got it. Yeah.
Well, maybe you answered the question sort of. You know, with the Yetzer Hara being the stronger, less concealed part. I was just wondering, like, why is the bad stuff so much easier than the good stuff? It's like so much. It's like there's always a fight to do the right thing.
Right.
I mean, anything
Right.
good, like anything, you have to make yourself do it,
That's
and
good.
we do.
That's good, and that's
but the
good
bad
because you're being
stuff-
honest about it. People say, nah, that's exactly the way it is in the world.
Every single bad thing is easier. Like,
Right.
if you just let yourself live the way you really felt like living, we'd never get out of bed. We'd watch TV, we'd eat junk food all day long,
Right.
we'd be narcissistic, only think of, like, I mean, it's just all easy.
Right.
Like, it's,
Right.
why
100%.
are we built like that?
Because
why is everything
because
good? Struggle.
Good. So
Some of them are easy.
let me answer the question. It's a good question. we have these different worlds we talked about.
You just made me mad with this whole thing.
You're right. We have the world of Asiya, action, and we have Yitzira, the next level. And the way it works is the sages tell us that really when you get into this world Asiya, it's mostly negative. Negative. This one's 50-50. This is mostly good. And what that means is that as you come down into this world, into the lower place, you're in the coal and gold mines. You get dirty going into the coal or gold mines. You get dirty because you got to pull out the stuff that's in the bottom, and that's a hard job. But that is our job. If it was easy, then you know, then there'll be no point. When you do, if I tell somebody, someone says to me, you know, life is so hard, blah, blah, blah. I said, listen, I'm going to ask a question, very simple question. I want to now give you a job, and I'm going to pay you $1 billion. You define the job. Great. Watch TV all day. I'll do nothing. I said, wait a minute. Are you serious? Is that what would you be willing to do for $1 billion? What I'm willing to do? Oh, that's a different question. For $1 billion, I'll do anything. So if you're getting paid more than $1 billion, which you are, why would you think it's easy? you're in the gold mines now. We're in the bottom of, we talk about the lofty worlds. We're down in the bottom here, scooping up all the stuff. We're going through the mud and picking out the gold and the diamonds. That's hard work, and that really is. And otherwise, we wouldn't have. Now, we can all succeed, because if we couldn't have this succeed, then there would be no point. But their test has to be great. And there's one Mussar rabbi who gives the following answer. He says, there's another reason why he claims the Yetzer Hara is stronger than the Yetzer Hara Tov. This is a Mussar. Mussar is the ethical, the rabbis who developed the ethical movement of focusing on personality traits. He gives a little different answer than what I said. I said now it's just hard because that's what you have to work at. You have to work at it, and so therefore it's going to be hard work. He says another answer. He says, listen, he said, it's a very interesting answer. He says that if it was even, and you could do it from your mind, just choose this and that, you'd never come unto God. You'd say, great, I'll be a good person, I'll do my thing, but I don't need a relationship with God because I can do it on my own. He actually gives the answer that by being that the Yetzer Hara has the upper hand, so at a certain point, and it's a verse in Tehillim and Psalms, it says that you need to call out to God and say, help, I'm having a hard time here. And that actually gets you to the main point, because the main point is to connect to the infinite. Which is why its sages say, why were all of the Jewish matriarchs barren? They were all barren. Sarah we know, Rebecca we know, Rachel we know, Leah we don't realize, but Leah was barren too. It was just because she was in a hard situation with her husband that Hashem answered her and opened her womb, but she was barren. Why were the 4 matriarchs all barren? And the answer is because God wanted their prayers. He wanted that ability for them to connect. And when a person's everything's going good, you don't do that. Things are going good, leave me alone. I'll send you a postcard, God. That's what happens, basically. When things are tough, you can call out. So that's 2 different answers here why it's so difficult. One is because the job is great, and we're going to get rewarded a lot, so it's got to be a worthwhile job. And the other answer is that the difficulty means that you still need to put the infinite in the calculation of relating to God. And let me say one last thing about this. By the way, but also with Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve in the beginning, they were in a world where there wasn't more negativity. They had the choice, and it was evenly balanced there. There was no negativity inside themselves. That's why in the story, they get the serpent comes to speak to them. Listen, I've done some bad things, but I never had a serpent come and have to trick me to do them. I was very capable of my own. Hey, I want to do this thing. I'll do it. And hey, come on, hey, buddy, it's me, the serpent. Go do this thing. What? The answer is because the sages tell us that the negativity was not inside of them. It had to be represented from the outside. They had no internal push for negativity. So there was a period in time when we were in that balance very easily. No negativity inside of us. We were weighing it out. Once they entered that state of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the world tilted, and now the negativity came inside of us, and that's why you don't need a serpent or anything else to delude you. You can do it all by yourself today. Ryan.
I just feel like if we had true freedom of choice, then it would be 50-50. I mean, I hear what you're saying about why it can't be 50-50, but real freedom of choice is that both options are as available and both options are as easy, and both options, it's just you choose one or the other.
Right. We have complete freedom of choice, but the stage right now is a bit tilted. But but not really. Let me show you. I'll show you why in a second. I'm gonna answer your question in 1 second, okay? Because I left one part out. So I gave this session a long time ago, and I'm not gonna do the whole thing again, but just briefly. There was a Jewish man. The story about a Jewish guy. His friends called him Siggy. His mother called him Sigmund. He was a nice Jewish boy who decided that he was going to create this idea in this world. And he had a very interesting system. He had something called the id. He had the ego. Looks like ego's here. Ego would be...
superego.
Isn't the superego on the right, or the ego's in the middle, or the superego's in the middle? You know these things.
Yeah, superego, and he has the id. Now Freud came up with this whole thing. Under the id, Freud also, besides for Freud's tremendous infatuation with sexual issues, that he certainly put under the id, that and cocaine. Besides that, he also had something called the death wish. The death wish he talks about, which, by the way, is very interesting because the id that Freud sort of stole from us is what we call the Yetzer Hara. Freud, either he learned this as a kid in some kind of Jewish context of Yetzer Hara, or he heard it, or he knew it, or he observed it. He observed it because in the world it's pretty, you can see it. You could see that people have some kind of push. He called that the id. Okay? Now, there's going to be a very, very fundamental difference between Freud and us. Although some of the structures are true, or sort of true, we have a whole different world. In Freud's world, the id is really you. That's really who you are. It's really you. And really, you know, that's really what you're about. That's not how we're going to say this at all. His superego is what he calls your parents telling you what to do. And this is a very good, the parents' injunctions. This is a very good system in Victorian Europe. You know, it's kind of like, because that's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with this idea of, on one hand, I'm a bundle of desire, I want to do all these things, and one is, sit properly, what's with you? You know, children are meant to be seen and not heard. You know, they have this Victorian, excuse me, I know it's a bit of imitation. Only the Americans I could have done and got away with it. You know? So you have this and that's what he's dealing with. That's why, and in Freud's world, his whole system is based on like the steam engine. It's like this forces, bah, bah. And your ego is how you're going to, not how you're going to resolve the conflict of the two. It's going to be how you're going to navigate. Getting all the id you can while not getting kicked out of society at the same time. Your ego is your balancing act. Now, that's really not exactly the case, but he did notice a lot of stuff. He noticed the Yetzer Hara, things pull you to a negative. What he calls the superego is totally wrong. That we'll call the Yetzer Tov. It's not only because your parents told you. If it is, then you're a robot. If you get to an age where you can't discern good, other than the fact that your parents made those injunctions on you, then you're not a person. You're not functioning the way a normal person functions. But what kicks in is the part when you realize it's right. You realize it's right. And then what are you? This is you. You are the power of free will. You are now the ability to choose which way you go. You have some pulling you this way, and some pulling you that way, and the you is the point of free will decision that I want to do this. And the systems are all the systems here. Body's pulling you here, Yetzer Hara is pushing it, its toes pushing you there, and Neshama is pushing you there. And back to Mayan's question before. Says, wait a minute, but the Yetzer Hara is closer to the body, which means that it should be it's more easy to do a negative thing because it's there. That's true, but the Neshama inside is the strongest of all of them, and that's how the scales get tilted back to really a free will decision. Because even though the body is more inclined towards the physical and the Yetzer Hara is more there, but the strongest one's right there inside. The Neshama is more powerful than all of them. And therefore the Neshama gives you the ability to push and make the right decision. And that's why really, in a certain sense, the whole Freudian idea of these things being not the same thing is not exactly true either. Because once you come to the point of being whole, you make the decisions that are proper. Your body, your soul, Yetzer Tov, and even your Yetzer Hara line up with you. Because the whole purpose of the Yetzer Hara is to push you to do the right thing. That's what it is. We say it in Shema every day. Serve Hashem b'chol levavcha. Serve God with both your hearts. Your heart to do good, your Yetzer Tov, which is like on the right side of your heart. And your heart to do bad, the Yetzer Hara that's on the left side of your heart. The things that pull you each way. Serve God with both of them. When you become a whole person, you're not in that kind of conflict anymore. Because what happens is, you can go from the top, get the neshama to talk. The neshama is going to go and command, get the Yetzer Tov to push it. The Yetzer Hara is going to get on board eventually, and the body's going to do it. Then you're going to be whole in the system. But if you delude yourself that there's no battle at all, then you're going to fall to the Yetzer Hara. If you realize these are part of the systems, but in the end you have the ability to go one of two ways. If you just follow the body and the Yetzer Hara, then the Yetzer Tov is what it says in the book of Mishlei. He's going to be like an old forgotten kid, poor guy, no one's going to pay attention to him. Yetzer Tov is going to lose his voice at a certain point. And the neshama leaves the person, as I told you earlier. When a person sins, the neshama actually leaves. Only little parts remain. They leave. The holy neshama could leave the person. So then the person is really split. It has a body and a Yetzer Hara, and then everything else is gone. You're not a whole person. You want to be a whole person if you get the soul and the Yetzer Tov to go and to get the body and the Yetzer Hara on board. Then what happens is you actually turn the body to being holy, and the Yetzer Hara gets on board also. The Yetzer Hara actually will do that. Remember the analogy I told you from the Zohar in the very beginning. The Zohar gives the analogy of the Yetzer Hara and the Satan is like the prostitute that the king hires to go and tempt his son. And the purpose of the prostitute is to tempt the son, but she wants the son to say no. But she has to go and make sure he does it from his own free will, and he has it. But once he says no, she's like, "Wow, you did it! Great, you passed the test." The Yetzer Hara wants to get on board also, but you got to be smart in how you deal with the Yetzer Hara. Because the Talmud says, just like you're dealing with children, the Yetzer Hara needs to have the left hand saying no, but the right hand saying, "Hey, I'm dealing with him." Don't just say, "Never! No!" You want to have a piece of cake? Fine. Here's how you can have it. After you do this, after you do that. Okay, you want to go on vacation, here's how you do it, here you do it. Whatever the thing is, usually if you're going to say no completely, you're probably going to rebel. You got to find a permissible way to give an outlet, right? People who are trying to be like, so righteous, no, I'm not taking 1 second of pleasure, I'm going to sit and learn all day. They usually pop. Doesn't mean you have to completely, fall for it. But you have to find an outlet, a kosher outlet for those things. And that's good. That way the Yetzer Hara is actually your driving force. And that's what the sages tell us. They say, Yetzer Hara is great. If it wasn't for the Yetzer Hara, you wouldn't get married. You wouldn't build a house. You wouldn't build a family. It becomes your fuel. It can motivate you. But you gotta know how to direct it. You know how to direct it. That's being directed from the Yetzer Tov and from the Neshama, and then you get the whole system in lines. And then it's not like Freud, you're stuck forever in this awful situation of just balancing these phony forces. You become a unified person who now has the Neshama directing, the body comes on board, and your Yetzers, your inclinations are now in line with what you truly want, because in your essence you really are a soul. That's what you are. The body that you have, and the Yetzer Hara you have, and the Yetzer Tov you have, are all the systems you need to line yourself up to what you have to accomplish. So if you have to accomplish something, and and therefore your body is lazy, and that's your tendency, then that's good. That means that's what you have to do. That means your soul really wants to be the quality of waking you up. And that's going to be your unique system in the world. And the Yetzer Hara, you use your personal Yetzer Hara, that's unique for you. That means when you overcome that, you're going to be, wow, this is who I am. You're going to understand who you really are, because you're going to have all the systems lined up, because they're all one system getting you towards one goal. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I just want to ask, what you spoke about when you get so bad and that the soul leaves you. Does teshuva, doing repentance, bring back the soul?
Sure, yeah.
It brings it up.
Yeah. Sure, 100%. And a quick question.
I'm just wondering, is becoming one whole in myself and revealing my neshama, does that relate somehow to revealing Hashem in the world? Like,
Sure.
Doing the mitzvot?
Sure.
Doing the,
It means they're revealing Hashem in the world, yeah, because that's what it's about. What it's about is that when you go and you become whole, then you're a vessel, you're a vehicle. And everyone looks at you and says, "Wow, this is the way to function in the world." And you do your what's called tikkun. We talk about this in so many different ways over the 10 sessions. It's tikkun olam, it's fixing the world, it's fixing yourself, it's fixing your neshama. It's all interconnected because then you've done what you have to do.
Say a person does go to the point where their soul is 99% detached, just enough to keep them alive. But what they do wrong, does it damage their soul further after it's been distanced to a certain?
So the way it works here is kind of last week's class about what happens to a person. The soul, the neshama never gets tainted at all. It just flies away. The ruach can actually be somewhat tainted from the experience. It needs to go through whatever spiritual purification they have to go through. The real actions in the nefesh, and that's why if you ever see in the Torah when it talks about kares being cut off, it talks about the nefesh, because the person can be cut off from experiencing his nefesh, his lower part of himself. The upper part, the neshama, never gets tainted. And that's why there's always a point where you can come back, because that part never gets tainted. Okay, great. Any other questions? We finished the 10-part series. Wow, okay.